4 do pop pop pop. All right, greetings from the wasteland. This is Freedom Phil outside of Survival Pod here. What's the topic? Every once in a while when I bring this up, I get a bunch of naysayers saying that's impossible. There's no way you can live that minimalistically, that cheap. And the base level for how I live can get down to about $100 per month. The base level. I always say $200 to $300 because maybe I want to buy, something, new video game, something cool on the internet, and then little maintenance fund there. But let's really get into it. What is the cheapest I do this for? Yeah, Freedom Phil, like and subscribe. Let's really get into it. Hey, turn up the video speed. Now, a lot of people have said, well, that's impossible. You can't be living for less than $100 a month. Well, let's go over the numbers. When I'm down here in the wasteland, my cost of living is what, $30 a month for cell phone with unlimited data, $30 a month for car insurance, and I really want to get that back down at least to 25 or lower. In fact, I could get the cell phone down to 25. I just haven't really bothered. The service has been pretty good, so it's worth the extra few bucks. Laundry, I'd say $15 a month, assuming I'm not just doing it in a river. Let's see. Auto insurance, laundry, cell phone. So maybe $10 to $20 a month for gas. And then people are like, what about food? Well, I go to food banks as I travel. And people are like, well, how do you keep the gas so low? Well, when I get to where I want to be, I just park here for like a month or longer. Sometimes if I say $20 per month, that's like saying I went into town twice. Okay, now if I stay out here, like let's say I just fully load up on supplies and the food bank was, the hunt was good. People are like, I would never go to the food bank. And hey, that's your choice, but you should never feel bad about it considering everybody along the way. Basically, the farmer got a tax deduction for all of his work. The trucker that moved it got a tax deduction. The company that processed it into, whatever type of food and put it in a box or a can, frozen, they also got a tax deduction. The truckers that moved it again to the Walmart DC or DC of any sort, tax deduction. The DC itself gets a tax deduction, and then another truck with tax deductions. And then the grocery store at the very end, they get a tax deduction they can throw it away and get no tax deduction, but they get a little deduction for the dumpster. But they get a huge deduction for giving it away as food. So if you paid taxes at any given point, you should never feel bad about that. Plus, a lot of people out there living off the system, they get food stamps. Yeah, there's a reason like Americans are really fat. And they're like, whoa, what does that have to do with it? Well, let's just say you get more enough food at the food banks, and then they give you for a single person, $250 to $300 for food stamps. That's why you see a lot of those people drinking energy drinks and, go to the dollar store and they buy everything on the candy aisle that they want because, well, they already have more than enough food. Never feel bad about going to a food bank. But let's just say I was actually going out and buying the food, and I do buy some food, some essentials, and then I kind of figure out what I want to get at the food banks. And that basically is all of maybe, let's say $100 a month. Because, beans and rice really aren't that expensive, and you really don't need that much. In fact, I'd argue most of us, including myself, as Americans, we're probably eating a little too much of everything. A lot of people could use some intermittent fasting. And so we're talking, under $200 a month to get by? And when I say get by, I'm happy. I mean, and you want me to put this in perspective? When I travel, if I want to travel, I get free gas. I just hold a sign that says, need gas money. And next to me is my dog. The sign says, dog loves burgers. And yeah, I've traveled all over the place for free, effectively. And then I stash away some of the cash, and then I slowly use it over the course of the year. Like if I'm power bumming, I might make let's say what was that a week? I made $2,000 to $3,000 in the course of a week and a half, or something. People are like, what? Because I'm really good at it. I take it like an art, which is funny because on the flip side, if I drive truck, I'm making 80 to 100K and I'm still living just as cheap as possible. So my base levels, assuming I didn't have the house up north, and I paid that off years ago, and I didn't have the basic, like, the stupid fees like utilities and all the taxes and the insurance and the other shit. Yeah, if it wasn't for that, my cost of living in America would be, well, there's the other property on the other side of the other state, and it's been paid off for years. With HOA plus taxes, that is about $60 a month. So let's just say about $250 a month and an extra $50, But if I got rid of all my properties, had no taxes, no issues, no nothing to deal with, yeah, about $200 a month. That's assuming I was buying food, and my God, if the food banks aren't bountiful, But yeah, I mean, when I've had people say that you can't do that. And okay, occasionally you're going to need a little bit of oil for the van. The little thing here and there, but that's why I say $200 to $300 a month. And I'm still playing catch up on a lot of video games. I have a lot of video games to catch up on. It's like still a lot of airwave TV to watch, decades worth of TV to watch, old classic songs to listen to, shit on the internet, the endless supply of things from the internet to listen to. So luckily for me, I can be cheaply entertained. And, some people would be like, I would never, and that's your choice. Do as you want to do. But when I run into these people that talk about how you can't make it in America, well, that's a choice. A lot of times people make a lot of bad choices in the early game. They have kids when they can't afford to feed themselves, and then they put themselves behind the 8 ball there, and they're working, for years to get back into a place they can be comfortable. I mean, like I've said before, you want to find a cheap house, go look in the Midwest. Just get online, look at a random small town in Texas or anywhere in the South, the Midwest, and there's houses you can find for anywhere from 20, 30, 50,000, 80,000. Some of them are old. They're going to have to do some work. But this is why what I've said with retirement by 30. If you go out and drive truck or have a trade and you're basically living as minimalistically as I described earlier, basically just living in the truck, and you're making 80 to 100K a year, you just start investing your money. And even if you're making a paltry 10%, that's still 10 grand. Like my basic, I'd say the northern house, part of the reason I want to get rid of it, because just if I was living there consistently, I think it cost me, and I'd have a wood stove if I was going to live there consistently. That would reduce some of the heating costs during the winter. Also be a hell of a lot more fucking comfortable. Electric heat fucking blows. I'm just saying. I think my cost of living up there would be $6,000. So when I say as minimalistically as possible, there's nothing really holding people back other than themselves and their addiction to everybody else's validation. I mean, one of the guys, let me give you a little story from the old era. Let's see, is there anybody commenting there? Yeah. Fucking retards like, where you at? Where you at? I'm in the wasteland. Figure it out. One of my buddies was 30 years old when he faked crazy. And he basically got a check for about, when you figure in the food stamps, for about $1,000 a month. And the government thinks he's living with his sister, paying $300 a month. No, he's living next to I don't know if he's still there. I think his dad probably retired by now. But his dad's diesel shop. And his dad's diesel shop, the city showed up one day and says, you can't live here. He says, I'm the night watchman. They're like, good answer. And you know what? It was a convenient situation for both of them because his dad was getting a little older, needed a little help here and there. Also, it's kind of cool to be able to talk to your son. And he basically also kept the tweakers from fucking messing with shit, But he basically just went in there and told them a bunch of waggedy woo ass bullshit, and he retired. Okay. Well, I got another buddy who faked crazy at 18 because he thought he was God. He was crown jewel faking crazy. And they're like, you can't be God. Can you prove I'm not? Literally. And he got a free apartment and money and some other stuff. The sad thing is for a lot of my friends that were doing that, I never bothered because I had things going on. Plus I had too much property. I thought about it. And to be honest, I did think about it. Because I was like, the world is just a fucking abusive scam in my mind a lot of the times. It's just like, hey, if you're a good, hardworking man, they love to fuck you over, try to make you into Al Bundy. But Yeah, man, he was retired at 18. And me, I just kind of looked at trucking, and I did trucking for a long time. And I made decent money doing it. You take the money and you save it, maybe invest, buy some property. And when you're the younger you are, you go out there and you buy, invest in the market. Go get some gold, some silver. And people are like, well, the price of gold right now is insane. But then again, the price of the dollar isn't worth shit, And I'm talking real gold. Honestly, what the price of gold is, I would argue it's probably better for you just to go out and obtain an old mining claim, somewhere for the winter in the desert, and just be like, yep, we're going to pan through the old tailings pond, or the, what do you call it, the tailings pile. Is it going to sift through that, Because God, it was, the other day I looked at it, it was $4,500 an ounce. A fucking ounce for gold. You got to understand, it was when I got out of high school, like late 90s, it was about $250 to $300 an ounce. I mean, Jesus. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy growth. And mind you, there's other things like, Microsoft and, some of the Bitcoin stuff that grew exponentially, but you can't really predict that shit. But you can really predict that the S&P will probably still be there, and the in Dow Jones. And I'm not giving you investment advice, but I'm just saying, they got a long track record. So, I mean, if this whole thing where I run into people that are all like, they talk about the cost of living and, how, if I was telling you the usual message about how the world is butt fucking you, and, it's the man, it's the thing, it's the 1%, I would be much more popular. But what I'm telling you is get rid of all the crap you don't need. Don't worry about buying expensive cars, garage princess, pavement princess type of pickup trucks, live as cheap as possible. I don't care whether you got to live with a bunch of friends with bunk beds or, friggin' live with your parents or a tent somewhere or a van life. You do the minimalistic thing for a handful of years when you're young and you're making money. You become a tradesman, a trucker, or something. Yeah, and then your money's making you money. And I guess the game win would be when your investments are paying out enough dividends on a yearly basis, and you only need a small fragment of it to where you could go to the Midwest and pay cash for a house. And if you don't believe me, just get on there. Like the other day, I found a lot in Brady, Texas for $5,000. I've seen houses for 20 or 30, and those ones were definitely remodel potential. But that's another thing. People always say, you buy an old house, oh, you'll be fixing stuff all the time. Is that really a big deal? Like if your money is making you money and you could literally you could pay for a new roof like it's nothing because, you had your act together. And that's why I say the last thing you should do is buy the house. Because that's just going to slow you down. Otherwise, you decide you're ready to stop being in the game. Then you get the house. Then you buy the brand new car and you keep it in the garage most of the time. And if you could bike ride to anything around town, fuck driving the car. But yeah, my minimum out here is anywhere from at the base level, $100 a month. $200, if I'm buying a lot of food. Most of the time I get all that for free. And it's about, let's say, just $200 to $300 a month. Now, if I can bum that much change in a handful of hours at the right situation. If I'm driving truck, I'm making around $45 to $50 an hour. I don't know what's holding all of you back other than yourselves. I mean, the first thing, you don't need to be a genius to have good strategy. That's one thing a lot of you really should realize. A lot of people talk about how a lot of people got lucky breaks. It's amazing how many people use strategy and everybody just looks, oh, that's a lucky break. Like you see a bunch of guys get screwed over in divorce and you're like, hey, how about I don't do that marriage thing? And then like you just look at things that don't mathematically work. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. This isn't complicated. You don't need to have like a genius level IQ to know how to save money. And then investing, it's becoming easier and easier every decade. Or I should say every few years it gets a little easier. So, I don't know. That's how you do it. And if you want to do it, you can. If you don't want to do it, no one's forcing you. But I don't want to hear you crying down the road when you're like 50, 60, 70 years old. You know, who's going to pay my Social Security or who's going to do this for me? When I remember all the people that bought flashy shit just to look cool. And most of that was just of that particular few years fashion trend. And then just like I was a garbage man, just closing thought. I was a garbage man for 4 years, and that's how I paid off my first house. And I'll tell you something. I watched a lot of trends end up in the trash. The summary of most people's lives is after the family or whatever groups pick through your stuff, whatever's been inherited and whatever's wanted, the rest of your life, for the most part, either ends up in a dumpster or a car crusher. That is the summation of your existence. Now, you might be a highly productive person and you do something great for the world, and more power to you. I'm glad you did that. But most people, all that fucking heaping up the Joneses you did was also it'd end up in a trash can. I just say, how about avoid it? Invest your money, have your money making you money, and retire before 30. Retirement by 30. That's why I call it that, 7 to 10 years. It's not complicated. I'll read some comments if there is any. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, you could spend more than 5,000. It's not, sometimes you can find it for 5 or 10. Hey, is that a Buc-ee's deal there? Right on. I used to gold mine on the west side of the Grand Canyon. Yeah. There's some old guys I knew that, as far as the gold mining goes, they just did it. They're like, yeah, I travel and I do this and it pays. It does not. He's like, I'm not expecting to get rich off it, but it pays for my gas, it pays for my basics, keeps my booze and my weed flowing. I'm like, right on, man. But hey, each to their own, man. And let's see. Let's just boom. And we're going to see anybody else here. And some of these people are so retarded. Look at this shit up here. Are you on? Like, what the fuck is that? Fucking retards. No offense, but I don't even want you watching my channel. Yeah, that's sad. Let's read the other. My 26-year-old son decided he wanted to be an electrician last year. Worked 60 hours a week. Yeah, man, there's a lot of money to be made doing the electrician's work. And the beauty of it is, I would go for electricians if I was to give any advice. Not that plumbing's bad, but plumbing is a lot of PEX and black pipe. PEX is stupidly easy to do. If you got a plumbing buddy, like let's say you're an electrician, you know a guy that's a plumber and you can trade work, and learn from both of each other. The reason I say electrician is because look at how much solar's going up. Look at how many electric cars are going up. We're going to a more electrified world. I think electrician is a real solid bet. And plus, I don't know, you guys ever done the rough electrician's work? It ain't like we got a robot that can go through there and hold a drill. You go and drilling through them boards and then you're running that cable, running that Romex. No, electrician's a good choice. Anyhow, this is Freedom Phil. Like and subscribe. That's how you retire by 30. And that's how I live off less than $200 to $300 a month. So, peace. I gotta go check the oven.